Government's view of the economy could be summed up in a few short phrases. If it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. And if it stops moving, subsidize it. Those words from Ronald Reagan hit the bullseye. And 2014 has already seen 2 out of these 3 realities come to pass in one of the nation's newest growth industries, e-cigarettes. Why the focus on e-cigs? Because when you combine what they are and their growing popularity with how the government has reacted to them, it represents not only the embodiment of Reagan's statement, but a revealing insight into what the left values above all else. Faced with the choice of health and safety or revenue and regulation, it seems more and more governments at all levels are choosing, you guessed it, revenue and regulation. Allow me to explain such a bold statement. There's been a virtual jihad against e-cigarettes. The reason the term jihad is appropriate is that the various campaigns to tax and regulate e-cigs are essentially articles of faith, unsupported by science, to the detriment of public health, and resulting in more money and power accumulating in the hands of politicians and bureaucrats and away from civil society. Now, the federal government started taxing and regulating tobacco in the Republic's earliest days, and they continuously go back to that well to fund their various dreams and schemes, arguing that such taxation and regulation is a relatively painless way of relieving the citizenry of their hard-earned money. The federal government collects $1.01 per pack, and at more than 82 million packs of cigarettes sold in an average day, that adds up to real money. Tobacco taxes also happen to hit the poorest the hardest. But apparently, this doesn't matter much to leftists who claim to stand up for the poor, when helping the poor would decrease both tax revenues for these politicians to spend and regulations that give them more control over our lives. E-cigs were invented to counter the many dangers of smoking. The vaporized solution is infinitely safer to inhale than smoke from burning tobacco. One of the only credible studies done on the solution showed no health concerns based on generally accepted exposure limits, despite scare stories by the New York Times and others, none of which contain either negative scientific data about e-cigs or documented cases of people getting sick from them. The fact is that nicotine is not very dangerous at all. So you would think public-minded politicians would want people to transition from the deadly smoking to the relatively harmless vaping. And you would be wrong. See, the government has a problem. Nicotine solution has no excise tax like tobacco. The federal, state, and local government's pocketbooks are hit hard when someone switches from smoking tobacco to using a vaporizer. So, city, state, and local governments across the country are lining up to restrict and ban e-cigs. Are they trying to protect the profits they make from traditional tobacco sales? Well, follow the money. No choice can be quite as stark as the one between public health and money. And no matter whether they protest that it isn't their intention, it seems clear that the forces of big government have chosen the latter.